But you can see this is the sales manager job description here. Your key activities and duties are first, and there's a bunch of little benchmarks on here. You can see these key activities and duties, and all these key activities and duties really can be broken down into two major areas. Those two major areas are, number one, recruiting. That's big. And number two, retention. The idea of having this view of the finish line to keep working, because, usually you're in constant active income where we have to work, do activities to both generate and convert clients into commissions. And the only way to make more money is to work harder. And that becomes a grind. It actually wears people down a lot faster than the W-2 world, where you just punch the clock every week and collect your paycheck at the end of every 2 weeks without any regard to how hard you worked. I mean, in theory, if you don't work hard, you'll lose your job. But if you can, operate in a pass-fail environment like that, where you're operating at really a C-, but that's good enough to keep your job, there isn't a lot of stress. Whereas if you operate in a C- in real estate, you're going to get paid like a C-. So there's a lot more pressure, a lot more volatility. I mean, when things move from summer to fall, every year in most parts of the country, sales volume drops. That's stressful. Through the winter, less sales volume, less commissions, generally speaking, being earned. Stressful. Interest rates go up and down. That can pause, albeit for short periods of time, typically. Sales. Stressful. Why everybody else is just, even though it's for much lower amounts of average pay, they're punching the clock. So that gets tiring. And it's really good to have goals at the end of the rainbow to see what the finish line looks like. What am I working towards here? I just can't keep doing this until I'm 75 years old. Too stressful, tires me out. So what are you working towards? And that'll give you a quicker finish line. And the idea of being able to replace yourself is very, very common. Like I've said, and we coach many of the highest producing agents in the country, and quite a few of them are regularly stepping out of production to varying degrees, right? You might step out of representing buyers, then you might step out of taking listings, then you might step out of running the team, and you might, you might retire. You might be a better mom or a more present mom or dad. You might start going into a different business venture. We've got clients that are running flipping businesses, that are developing property, that are devoting full-time to charitable work, that are running property management, opening mortgage, opening title, and we coach them with that too. But to do that, we got to be able to replace ourselves with regards to the real estate sales. So even if you're watching this and you're nowhere near this, let me tell you, it's a good idea to have an idea of what the finish line looks like, to keep you motivated, to trudge through the ups and downs, the peaks and valleys of a commission-based business, because it is very real. I think the book that made it the most popular and realistic and motivated so many down this path was a book called The Millionaire Real Estate Agent by Gary Keller. I mean, it's the best-selling real estate book of all time, and it brought out the idea of going 7th level. And I think it's on page 201 or 2. I think it's 202. He shows levels 1 through 7, and level 7 is when you step away and you step out of production as the team leader, and the team runs itself, and you collect passive income from your team. And he talks about how he wrote the book because he couldn't sell his real estate business. You might be able to sell a brokerage, albeit it's pretty tough, but very, very tough to sell your real estate sales business for anything. Because once you step out of production, oftentimes your agents leave, and oftentimes your clients don't want to come to the team anymore. So how do we keep the team running to continuously generate business? Plus, he determined you can make more money that way, because if you sell your real estate sales business, you might get paid, 3 years of your profits, which is probably the going rate for a real estate sales business if you can sell it. So the going rate for any business, 3 years net profits. That's kind of the rule of thumb of what a business is worth. in this world. However, he determined if I can just keep the business running, I'll make a lot more money than 3 years net business, because this thing can run for 5, 10, 15, 20, 30 years with my name on it. And I just have this passive stream of income all the way until, in theory, death. And believe it or not, that's not a pipe dream. That's actually real. In fact, from when Gary wrote the book around, the turn of the century to now, I mean, real estate business has changed. Now it's happening very, very frequently. I mean, trust me, it's 1 out of every 1,000 agents that can achieve that fate. But this concept of being able to sell your business versus having it run itself, man, that changed everything about how we look at real estate businesses. It's the future of it. And that's where it's gone. And that's, I mean, the amount of time someone can sell a business to somebody else and make anything even reasonably close to good income versus replace themselves. Oh, replacing themselves is much more frequent and much more lucrative. And that provides and that's why we do it. Let me explain to you what that looks like and how we can do that. And that usually starts with the advent of some sort of sales manager. Okay. You can call it whatever you want. Operations director. I've heard people call it sales manager. I've heard people call it general manager. I've heard people call it lead buyer's agent. I've heard people call it lead sales agent. All of those things are interchangeable depending on who you hang out with, who you talk to, what podcast you listen to. Basically, it's someone running the sales agents on your team. Generally speaking, if you're still taking listings yourself, but you have a team of buyer's agents, we'll call that a lead buyer's agent. If other people are taking listings and you're stepping out of listings, we usually call that person the sales manager or general manager or something like that. And that person is usually going to be the person that also ends up replacing you from running the team down the road. There's usually a stepping stone process of taking someone into that leadership role. As you slowly step out of production, that person is slowly gaining influence of the agents, the team, the clientele, learning, being coached by you as the team leader, and they're slowly taking on more responsibility so you can stop taking listings and stop being in production at all, and then stop managing the team even, and start focusing your time and energy on either your personal life or other business endeavors, retirement, or what have you. Everything we talked about. So that's kind of the idea there. And so starting with that sales manager, what that sales manager looks like, what their job description looks like, and how you compensate them, I think is probably the most prudent place for us to start. So let me do that. And basically, in a nutshell, what that is going to look like is we're going to be in a scenario where this person hopefully is going to be someone on your team that rises up and sets the standard for the rest of the team members. And what I mean by saying the standard is they're producing at a high level, number one. Number two, they show up and have a great attitude. Number three, they're also generating a significant amount of business from their own sphere of influence. They're not just relying on the team's leads. That's really important, because if you reward and put on a pedestal someone who's totally dependent and is not also trying to grow their own book of business within the team, you set a terrible example for the rest of the team to be dependent. And when agents are dependent, it's not a good culture on your team. They need, and they don't own anything. All they do is lead convert, and they don't lead generate. In fact, they don't even know the difference between the two. It's a very, very dismal place where they're always needing. So if you want a team where the agents actually produce and have a good culture and actually bring business to the team too, at least to some degree, we want to make sure we reward a leader that has done it and accomplished that. So your radar is always up for this person. When you're running a team, you're always looking for an agent that's like that, because that's going to be your next leader, and you're only as good as your bench. So it's really crucial when thinking about replacing yourself to have your eyeballs for that, your radar up for that type of person. They could come from another team, but that's a little harder because oftentimes they come with bad habits. Oftentimes they don't have the influence of the other team members. When you bring somebody up and they succeed and they've proven themselves on those 2 or 3 areas, it's a lot easier for them to gain influence over the rest because they've been proving it to them along the way. You bring somebody in and put them right above them, that's kind of like W-2 employee behavior. That's a little tougher with fickle little independent contractors. They have a hard time with their egos. In the W-2 world, you can hire a manager and say, do what that person says or else you're fired. And they'll worry about it. You do that kind of thing in independent contractor world, it's a little tougher level of leadership. It's harder to be a leader in real estate than it is in the normal corporate world. That's probably the biggest adjustment people have from coming from management into leadership. I call it management in the corporate world. You gotta manage by position. In other words, your leadership really is just management, which is a lower level of leadership. It's do what I say or you're fired. However, if you're commission-based, independent contractor commission-based especially, it's not do what I say or you're failed. If you don't do what I say, you may leave and go to the competitor. You might walk across the street. You might start your own team. You might go be a solo agent. You might go to another brokerage. You might leave me. It's follow me because you want to follow me. You lead by influence. So you have to demonstrate a higher level of leadership. People have got to like you. They have to respect you. They have to want what you have, which means business coming to you that you're bringing to the team. You don't have to chase everything. You've spent time building a book of business that actually delivers results to you later. So we have to evidence all those things in a sales manager type of role. Okay. So that's the concept behind that position is where, that it's that person that can demonstrate leadership by influence. Very hard to bring in a newbie too. A little bit, the more time under their belt, the easier it is to establish influence. The more business they generate on their own, as opposed to convert from just the team, again, better. Okay. So that's the concept that I think is important for us to definitely understand. I'm going to give you an idea, and you can download this here, what that job description looks like, okay? And I'm going to talk about this, your key activities and duties, some job-specific skills, some performance benchmarks, and compensation. We're going to go through each of these, okay? But you can see this is the sales manager job description here. Your key activities and duties are first, and there's a bunch of little benchmarks on here. You can see these key activities and duties, and all these key activities and duties really can be broken down into 2 major areas. Those 2 major areas are, number 1, recruiting. That's big. And number 2, retention. Here's why. To grow the team, we're going to talk about performance benchmarks and compensation here in a minute, but they're going to be compensated to some degree based upon the growth of the team. And the growth is going to be in production, which assumedly everything else is equal, increases your income as the team leader, let's say, if I'm talking to the team leader. And I'll tell you right now, you can increase the production of the team, which is part of retention. Retention is training, coaching, mentoring to help everybody sell more. Recruiting is to bring in more agents to help the team sell more. Both of those 2 pillars increase the production and income of the team. And if you got a team and you're like, hey, I don't want to recruit, my heart bleeds for you because you will lose agents. That just happens. And if you haven't got that down yet in real estate, you got another thing coming. People retire, they get burned out, they have babies, they get divorces, they move, they quit, they want steady paying jobs, they want to open their own team. There is nothing you can do about it. Agents are going to come and go. So if you aren't growing, you are dying. Understand to some degree, as much as you hate to say it or admit it, you're a business person. Also a people person, but you're also a business person, which means to some degree, these people are numbers. They're not just people. And if you put all your energy and stress into just the people you got, you're going to burn out and quit this. You're going to have to start to act like a leader and treat it like a business too. And I know that's hard for people, and maybe leadership's not cut out for you, but you're going to have to grow some degree of thick skin to be a leader. So you always got to be recruiting or you're dying. That is a cardinal rule of real estate. You must develop a bench, at least of prospective recruits that you're building relationship with when you lose some people. Recruiting is the most powerful. And if you do not emphasize recruiting as a part of their job description up front, they will start not recruiting and they won't ever recruit. And when you ask them to later, they will not acknowledge that's part of their job description. Why? It's the hardest thing to do in real estate. I cannot tell you how many brokers, how many leaders, how many sales managers start out buying a brokerage, starting a brokerage, or running a team thinking they're going to be able to recruit. And it's about 1 out of 1,000 that actually can. The other 999 come up with reasons why they don't want to or need to once they realize how hard it is. Almost no one admits they couldn't do it very well. So if you start out on the wrong foot by not establishing 50% of their job is recruiting, you're going to really regret that one. Trust me, I've been coaching this for too long. And every ICC coach knows this, and we push this on all of our leaders. It is a big part of your job, just like lead generation is a part of an agent's job. And if you don't establish that up front, recruiting is lead generation. It's the ultimate lead generation. And if you don't lead generate, you're going to slowly die in real estate, or you will put a lid on your production that you never get past and never change. And if you don't recruit, the same thing happens with you as a leader or your organization. So establish recruiting up front, which means we do have performance benchmarks on the job description that we hold them to right away. They're expected to conduct a minimum of blank amount of recruiting appointments per month and recruit a specific number of agents per year. And that could be 2 agents a year if you're a small team. That could be 15 agents a year, a big team, whatever. How many recruiting appointments per month? Could be 1 a month. It could be 4 a month. It could be, I've seen 40 for big brokerages. I've done 40 a month. Done more than that, actually. And boy, is that a challenge before you jump on that, right? So that's the performance benchmarks for recruiting, right? So because of that, recruiting is a huge part, the biggest part. It's the part you have to emphasize, okay? And I'm going to leave it with this on recruiting. Just like when you're coaching agents or you're hearing yourself being coached as an agent, you don't need to be coached on customer service. You got that. That's the part we all do. We people please all day long. I'm yet to have anybody leave real estate because they hated handling all their clients. They leave real estate because they don't have enough business, enough income to justify staying in it. Even when people retire, people don't retire when they have 100 transactions a year. They find a way to replace themselves. If they step out and just shut the faucet off on income, that's because there wasn't enough business to stick around and try to even replace yourself with. And there's no exceptions to that rule. Or you just got someone who needs to be hit over the head with a tack hammer because they're a moron just for shutting off that much income without trying to keep passive income coming in and helping somebody in their leadership path. So that's the way that works. So just like agents need to be taught lead generation from the start is everything to establish that habit, leader of a brokerage or a team needs to be taught the exact same thing and needs to be constantly coached on that. Because if they're not constantly coached on that, they will stop doing that. Right? Second most important part of replacing yourself as a team leader is going to be retention activities, right? So if you got someone running your team that we've established the importance of recruiting them in both the sales manager role, broker manager, all of that, and what that does mentally, culturally, everything. Retention's easy because that's the part that every sales manager wants to do. I want to love on my people. I want to coach my people. The idea of going out and recruiting is the hard part. Going out and getting business is the hard part. Just like when we have clients, we want to buy them gifts and call them and answer the phone right away and all that fun stuff. As a manager or a leader in real estate, retention's the easier part. We love on them. We take them to lunch. We gain their influence. We coach them. We train them. We might even hold classes if our organization's big enough. Things like that. Now, you still got to have the influence based on all the key factors I told you before, right? So that comes kind of innate. And that's why on this job description, which I think is the most complete I've ever seen, so much time went into this, in this job description, which I call, again, sales manager, but it could be, team leader, lead buyer specialist, broker manager, whatever you want to call it. Those job specific skills, right? I mean, they're the natural evolution of a leader that we talked about. The other half of the key activities and duties is retention. What are their performance benchmarks, right? We can see the sales manager is expected to train agents by implementing a new agent curriculum or coaching program to get agents into production and closing a minimum of blah, blah, blah transactions in the first year and a minimum of how many transactions per year after. Now, you could actually get more specific here. I mean, you could actually have this pertain to the amount of coaching appointments you're going to have with the agents per week, sales training classes you're going to have per week. There's all kinds of activity-based indicators that we could actually implement in your performance benchmarks as a leader. And quite frankly, the more you have, the better off you'll be, the more specific you get. Because otherwise, it is very easy to just behave like the vast majority of agents behave and fall right back into customer service mode and putting out fires all day. It's very easy to deal with every problem that comes up in the organization, that comes up in your team, that comes up in the office. It's very easy just to be putting out fires all day if you never have any activity-based indicators with regards to recruiting and increasing production. Recruiting and retention are the keys. So how much on the retention end are we coaching? How much are we training? How much are we tracking that? Are we meeting regularly and going over specific benchmarks on that? And recruiting, of course, never can stop for all the reasons we talked about. So we got to have benchmarks on that, and they have to sign on to that up front. So we got to show that to them. If someone sees that job description and shies away because they're going to be held accountable to specified activity-based indicators being tracked, we do not have the right person here, guys. We do not have the right person. That's somebody who wants a meal ticket, and your organization will not likely grow if you hire them, okay? Now, running a team, again, for all the reasons we replace ourselves, if we do replace ourselves, if we do hire this person to be our lead buyer specialist, listing specialist, team leader, general manager, sales manager, whatever you want to call them, our leader, our figurative leader, how do we compensate them? And probably the most simple way to do it is this person's going to remain in production, assuming they are selling, at least when we start. Because when we start and first step away, there isn't like a ton of profit to live our lifestyle and slap $130,000 salary or something. It depends on where you live, if that's a big deal or not. But you get it, whatever's a big deal to your area, and still live your own lifestyle. You hear that, you're like, no way, I'm not going to replace myself. Then you get stuck in that active income state with no hopes of passive income ever. Not to mention, if you're still in production, I mean, it's kind of hard. You're like, man, I wish these agents would come in and do what they're supposed to do every day. But if you're still in production, or you have a lifestyle that means you don't want to be in the office every single day, and you hire someone, now they might be able to hold everyone accountable to coming in the office every day, especially your new licensees. New licensees, when they first start, are very susceptible to, they want to learn, they want to go, they want to grow. Now, after 6 months to a year in the business, they usually, when they come to your team, they're not going to be willing to come in the office every day and lead generate every morning, watch training videos, whatever. But new licensees, we can create a crop of those and create a really high success rate if you have a sales manager that's willing to be there with them and have them come in every day. So you might always have a new crop and have a new standard for new licensees where they come in if you have a sales manager willing to do it. So he's actually going to be able to provide better leadership than you would if you don't have the time or the bandwidth. So that can be pretty powerful. And it's amazing how they love to do that, but they don't want to do their own lead generation. It's just shocking. It's like a chronic problem. They would love to train oversee other people lead generating if they don't have to do it themselves. I have no idea why that happens, but that totally happens. I just don't have those types of degrees to tell you neurologically why that happens, but it freaking happens. It's weird. It's the same amount of time. Neither one of them is digging a ditch either, but one slightly harder than the other, I guess. And it's just, they'll gravitate to the leadership aspect of lead generation, other to the doing part of lead generation very, very quickly. Okay. So they're going to keep on being able to sell for a period of time. And then you're going to compensate them. And I put the compensation down at the bottom of the job description, and we're going to compensate them by some sort of override. I usually say somewhere between 5 and 10% override on the gross commission income. Okay. So it's almost like we give them a split, right? If someone's on a 50-50 split, now they're on a 50-50 split with all the other agents, except you're only going to get 45%, let's say, as the team leader, because you got to pay 5 of it to your new general manager or your new whatever sales manager. Makes sense? And then it says sales manager to be able to sell as himself, right? So you can compensate them by saying, hey, they don't, maybe they don't have to pay a commission split on, if you need to compensate them more than that, that's going to be hard to tell. That's based on you, because it's a percentage that's different everywhere in the country. If you're in a high volume centric area, like maybe Southern California, where the average price is much higher than the national median price, 5% of the GCI of a high producing team might be enough. That might be $100,000 a year. But if you're in a part of the country where the average price is less than $200,000, 5% may be $15,000 a year. And that may not be enough to excite someone to take on all those leadership responsibilities. So in that case, you might need to go up to 10% to make it worthwhile. I always think you need to be up above 50,000, depending on where you live, to 100, and it could be even 125,000 in really, really high priced areas to excite someone to devote a lot of extra time. They also got to want to be a leader. Don't try to talk someone into a leader that doesn't have a passion for empowering others. I will never hire a coach that doesn't have that passion. They got to want to, not for their ego, because they love watching others succeed. You need to find someone like that. Can't just be about the money, but we do need to compensate them because they're already selling and now they're going to do this too. The good news is they can lead generate right alongside them to set a good example and hold them accountable to be there for their own business. And they can still show property and list in the afternoon like they would anyway. And they're going to create a huge crop. You get busy enough, they get busy enough on their own deal. They can start kind of using the other agents on the team as showing assistants or buying agents, depending on how much business they're giving them, and giving them small splits so they themselves are almost informally running their own team inside the team, so they can start focusing more on listings and preserving their time like you do as a team leader. That happens all the time. Again, these are baby steps to the finish line of replacing yourself. This is your first hire. These are the first steps. Make sense? Now, you might also compensate them by allowing them to have a higher commission split. Maybe they're on a 50-50, but you hire them from this job and they can be on a 75-25 for the business that they generate from their own sphere of influence now. They've earned the right to do that because we wouldn't have put them in the role unless they generated a decent amount of business from their own SOI. Maybe we increase that split. Maybe, depending on how much production, and how much maybe you can't pay them as much. So maybe they don't pay any split on their own SOI. If you can only pay them a small override. Just ways to get flexible depending on the need and depending on your average sales price. But that's how our compensation model works. So you can actually do it without paying this person anything, just by allowing them overrides. So your profit margin, it may go down a little bit, but remember, we have production standards here. So if they don't grow the team through recruiting to make up for what you're paying them, then we're not going to be in business much longer. So you're not going to have to keep paying them. So the amount that they grow through recruiting should increase those production levels. And guys, this is why recruiting is so important. If you're paying someone a percentage based upon a commission override like that, like I said, 5 to 10% is kind of the norm. If you're paying someone, now that's not true if you're running a brokerage of like 500 people. You give them a 5% override on GCI, that's outrageous. Okay, that's going to be a huge number. So understand that. Let's talk within reason. We're talking, those are more team structures, So so don't think this applies to every leadership position in real estate. I got to cover sometimes the obvious just in case. So understand the reason recruiting becomes so important is this person, they typically just, we're asking them to lead generate, to recruit and make more income. And they're going to get through points, especially in the spring and summer when they're really busy and they're burnt out. And they're saying, I'm not making enough money. Well, the way you're going to make more money is by recruiting. It's not going to be by getting your agents to sell more. Ask anyone that's run a team or a brokerage. We all think that if we just get our agents to sell more, we'll make more money. Newsflash, that ain't going to happen. They ain't going to sell more. You might move the needle a little bit through your fantastic motivation systems and tools, but you're not going to notice much there because your profit margins, 30, 40% at best. Big brokerage is going to be even less. Big team's going to be even less. They're not going to sell enough to really change your life as a leader through your coaching, training, leadership, mentoring, accountability, through your retention efforts. You're just not going to move the needle enough. And just like their 5% or 10% override's not going to go up enough. They're not going to feel enough difference by getting everyone to sell more. Not to mention, like we talked about, agents, the bigger you get, you're going to see more and more agents quit, go through weird seasons of life, go through divorces, have health problems, have babies, all these things pull them in and out of the business. So you just can't rely on them to just keep increasing production every single year. It's just unrealistic. It's not going to happen in this world. That's the flexibility and the beauty of the industry. And if you don't embrace that and run the business by the numbers a little bit, what's going to end up happening is you're going to get very frustrated with people that got into the business for the beauty of the flexibility. So that's why you got to make recruiting a part of it, because recruiting will move the needle. If they're making $65,000 a year as an override and that's not enough with 5 agents, well, what happens if they get 5 more agents? Because now they have 10. Now they're making $130,000 because we double that number, carry the 1, you got it. $130,000 a year. So it's all within their power. So don't gripe to me, put your head back down, get more agents, watch those numbers double. Do it again next year, number doubles again. And guess what? You as the team leader are also happy because in theory, you've got, like I gave you that example of 45% of the commission, your numbers are going up well more than you're compensating them. In fact, you should be cheering as you pay them more because that should be driving your numbers and your margin up too. Like I said, should have a 20, 30, 40%, depending on size, brokerage, and the animal that you're leading, profit margin. And that should be going up at a much higher rate than you're paying their 5% override, right? So you're cheering to pay them more because they're growing that number through recruiting, which is why another reason we must keep recruiting at the forefront of the job description. Because if it goes away, that sales manager is going to hit a ceiling and they're going to quit your job because they'll get frustrated with the agents not selling anymore. That's why recruiting is life, growth is life. If you get into straight retention mode, where you're just coaching, training, and doing all that stuff, your organization will die. And now I'm trying to prove to you why. Recruiting must exist or you will go backwards. Has to happen. Has to happen. For all the reasons above. And it has to do with just mental health. It's crazy. Even though it's so hard to do, it's the push, right? That's the push. Okay?